Welcome to Big Burnout, this interview series where I have brought top coaches, top authors, top experts to you to explain how you can beat burnout. Now, this is for social workers, healthcare professionals, and it's also for you. You might not be a social worker or a healthcare professional, but you're feeling overwhelmed. You're feeling stressed. You're feeling anxious. You feel so tired. You're tired of being tired. So thank you for joining me. My name is Taniya Hussain, and I am a stress management and trauma recovery coach. Today, my guest is Imani Evans. She's been passionately committed to the personal empowerment of individuals and communities for many years. She is the CEO and founder of Women Healing Women, a non-profit organization dedicated to the eradication of violence against women and girls. She says violence and trauma is an experience, not an identity. This is the founding principle on which she started Women Healing Women Incorporated. She's a professional counselor and life coach. She inspires her clients to turn painful experiences into purpose-driven missions. She's affectionately known as the barrier breaker and change maker. She holds a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology, a master's degree in counseling psychology, and she's currently pursuing a doctorate in counseling education and supervision. She's also the author of Today is the Miracle, a 30-day guide for overcoming challenges and creating miracles. She's also the author of Unveiling the I Am and My Transformational Journal. Imani is also a performance artist and a healer, combining her talents to creating an amazing atmosphere for transformation and empowerment. Oh, Imani, I'm so pleased this summit needs somebody of your expertise because I know that lots of counselors, social workers, therapists, they find it really hard to ask for help. I'd really be interested, and I'm sure everybody watching today be interested. Could you tell us about how your journey and how you've got to be doing what you're doing now?
Yeah, it's funny because I think I was born for this work and sort of the education came afterward. As a matter of fact, when I began pursuing my academic career, I thought I was going to be a surgeon. That was my interest. And I started in school doing that. And what I found was that it didn't quite fill me up in a passionate way. And so I switched to psychology. Now, mind you, all of my actual work, I had been working in mental health institution and social service programs. And then I switched to psychology and it was like breathing. And I told my friends, oh, I switched to psychology. I had a scholarship in biology. And so this was really devastating for a lot of people around me. And when I switched to psychology, I didn't even have to have a book, take notes in class. It just was right. And the people really close to me were like, yeah, that's what you do. So I think that was it. When I started Women Healing Women, I started Women Healing Women because I needed it. I think that a lot of the work I do is born out of my need that I feel personally. And then I have a sense that if I'm feeling it, I just don't believe that I'm alone. So I generally start that way. And that's how I came to really do the work. When I started Women Healing Women,
Mm,
I knew that I wanted, as a survivor of
mm,
sexual trauma myself, I was looking for a program that wasn't trying to make me a victim, that really didn't even use the word victim
mm,
because I didn't feel that. And I couldn't find it.
mm.
And so I started having meetings in my living room about 13 years ago. And the next thing I know, I had an organization. And so that sort of, it was a if you build it, they will come experience. I want to back up one second to say thank you to all the social workers and healthcare providers out there serving people in this way, because often our work can be very thankless. And that's okay. It's not why we do it, but I just want to take the moment to say, I know what you do. I see you. I care about you and thank you for all that you do.
And I wanted to ask you because I'm having been in trauma recovery for most of my life. I became an incest crisis line counselor really back in the day in the early 90s, late 80s, when in this country sexual abuse was being recognized that
Yeah.
it existed within the family.
Mhm.
And it wasn't some man in the strange man.
Boogeyman.
Yeah, it was basically that it existed and you needed to believe children. And Childline was formed in 1986. I came to the work when I think it was like a really pivotal moment. And I was also, alongside some very good friends of mine, the founder of the Ashifa project to look at
Mm.
sexual abuse within the Muslim community when nobody was wanting to talk about it within the
Wow.
community in the UK. And with a very prominent imam, he has now passed away, Sheikh Darsh, we actually organized the first seminar to do with child sexual abuse in the Muslim community. So when it comes to working with sexual abuse survivors, and this is something really very close to my heart. And I'm really glad that you've actually talked about that, even with in a lot of organizations and how it's talked about, sexual abuse is usually talked about sexual abuse victims
Mhm.
and not survivors. And I would even say sometimes there's a word thrivers, and then there's a word even beyond that. You're not just thriving, you're just being. And I wanted to the work that you do, and having worked with sexual abuse survivors and traumatized young people and adults all my life, is that you can just get traumatized by it. You have your own traumas, but you can also be traumatized by the work. So, how would you define burnout? And is it the same as vicarious trauma? And I'd like you to maybe also define what vicarious trauma is, because I know I only came across the term 2 years ago.
Mm.
Could you first define what we would class as burnout and what you would class as vicarious trauma?
So they are different. And I'm going to give you a non clinical, very simple line way of looking at them. Vicarious trauma is the pain and heaviness you carry for others, other people's story, and the heaviness and emotional heaviness and weight that takes for you. Burnout comes from your own pain stories. Does that make sense? So, vicarious trauma is what we feel about after you've been exposed to so many stories of pain and trauma. And some of us, depending on what the work is that we do, we can hear really horrific stories. And sometimes I actually even forget how traumatizing the stories are because after so many years of doing it, you develop some sense of commonality to hearing those stories. And I can forget that. And I had a board member one time with whom I was discussing some service that we were providing to a woman. And I was asking if she, because she's also in the profession in a different way, would she step in and be this person's advocate?
Mhm.
And I began telling her the story of this woman's assault in her home and what we needed her to do to support her. And she began to cry. And it struck me in that moment how heavy that story was. Imagine hearing those kinds of things every day.
Mm.
And it is traumatizing to hear them. You carry the fears and the pain. So imagine hearing a story of someone breaking into a woman's window and how he can't comes in the window and attacks her. And then you go home at night and you're checking your windows and you're absorbing that fear. That is vicarious trauma. Burnout comes from the chronic stress or really the episodic stress
Mm.
that we experience
Mm.
and that doesn't ever get relieved or managed in such a way that brings us relief. And then we just lose the sort of the energy to be present. And so they are very different. The burnout comes from our own stress, the internal processing of our own fears, and the vicarious trauma comes from absorbing others.
I'm so glad that you've explained the difference, because I think sometimes we do not even recognize how we're carrying other people and other
Yeah.
people's energy, how it actually affects us, because we feel that by thinking it and by knowing the theory and being professional and we're okay. But a lot of the time we're not okay. So
Mm.
how do you heal from, first of all, yeah, how do you heal from burnout? How do you protect yourself or prevent burnout?
Sure. So I think particularly having a really good self-care plan is that you're actively working is a way to deal with burnout. So I want to back up and say a couple things in terms of dealing with vicarious trauma and the overexposure of
Mm,
hearing pain, there are a couple things I would recommend in that regard. And one is again a self-care plan would be the same for vicarious trauma and for burnout, but also to maintain supervision. A lot of times, if we've been in the field for a long time, people don't do the supervision that may have been required
mhm,
when you were in school or pursuing a
mhm,
licensure or certification. But
mhm,
the reality is that supervision allows you to be able to talk out issues, to be able to share with someone the insights and the horrific stories. So you're not going home sharing horrific stories with people who are not equipped to handle it and to give you continued insight in your professional development. I think that goes on in perpetuity for as long as you're in
mhm,
this
mhm,
profession. It's a critical thing to do to maintain supervision. As far as burnout, I do think that it's essential to have a self-care plan. One of the things that is very common among social workers, counselors, and mental health providers
mhm.
is this idea of backburnering our own needs. And I can tell you for myself, I was raised by one good old, I love her. My mother is a wonderful person. We're best friends.
Yeah.
But I was raised by one good old martyr. And so I learned very early about sacrificing myself and how the measure of love was in this sacrifice of self. But what you really don't learn is that balance and that the caregiving that we do must first include ourselves. And the best mothering you can do includes taking care of your child's mother, yourself.
Mm,
So I think that, or your child's father, whomever you
mhm.
are, it's imperative to make sure that we're doing that. We have an active self care plan. And then I always tell people once you have that self care plan, share it with other people so that they can help hold you accountable to it.
Yeah, I love that thing about accountability because you can make all the plans in the world, but sometimes you don't keep promises to yourself. And that's what I learned the other day. Somebody was saying, and I thought, that makes so much sense. Integrity, we often see as being keeping promises to other people. So if you don't keep promises to other people, you're not a person of integrity. And then somebody was saying, "Hey, isn't integrity also about keeping promises to others?" And I'm
Yourself.
like, wow, that is
Mhm.
just, and it really made me shift and experience integrity in a very different way. And you've given some very practical tips here. And I think sometimes us social workers, us therapists, us healthcare professionals, we just think so much from a very intellectual and very detached way. And we don't integrate our heart and our head and our body and our spirit. And I think you started also saying about how the work can really affect our bodies, the trauma
Mhm.
we carry of our own personal traumas and also the trauma that we carry of our clients and our patients can end up being stored in our body and we don't even realize how it affects us. So, have you had experience of this yourself in how the work affected you somatically?
Oh, absolutely. Actually, several significant times over my career, but the most recent would probably be, I would say, in 2012.
Mhm,
And so in 2012, I was doing a lot of work. Women Healing Women was seeing a lot of clients, and I was doing a lot of direct services and doing a lot of traveling and talking about sexual violence. And I have really detached myself from all the practices that I know help me stay well. And it just happens slowly. It's the one day you don't get up and meditate. And then that one day turns into 3 day you skip the gym and because you're out of town and you don't like their gym. And then that 3 day turns into 5. That was what was happening to me. And then in place of those things that I was doing for myself, I just put more work. I would just put more work. Oh, I have an extra 10 minutes. I'll talk with this woman on the phone about her situation. And it all came to a head around Thanksgiving of 2012. I was just walking through the house and I was cleaning. And when I finished, I felt this burning sensation in my feet. And I thought, what is that? I thought maybe I was cleaning with a new cleaning solution. So I thought maybe it had something to do with that. I looked down and my feet had began to break out with these red, blistery. I don't even not sure exactly how to describe them. I actually took pictures of both my feet and hands for a blog that I was writing at the time. And then it happened to my hands. And then all my feet and my hands began to swell
Yeah.
3 times the size. And it was excruciatingly painful.
Yeah.
See, so when I absorb stress, I go full force. I don't just get a headache or something. Like I have to go full force, right? So I had to go to the emergency room. I couldn't even put shoes on. I couldn't walk. It was extremely painful. And when I walked in, and you never want to hear a doctor say this to you, he said, "Ooh, I don't know what that is, but it looks painful." And I was like, "Yeah." So he was said, "I'm gonna give you some pain medicine, but you need to go see a specialist." So I said, "Okay." So I went to see they made sure it wasn't viral. They did some tests and made sure it wasn't viral and that kind of thing and it wasn't a bug, and they did that, and, he said, "Now you need to go see a skin specialist." I said, "I don't know what this is. I've never seen it before." I walked into the dermatologist, as soon as I plopped my giant feet and hands up on his table, he said, "Oh, I know exactly what that is. I'm gonna culture it." He said, "But I know exactly what it is because I've seen it with people going through very difficult divorces." And I said, "What is it?" And he said and I wasn't going through a divorce, so there there was that. I wasn't even married at the time. And he said, "It is comes from stress." And it was a type of acute dermatitis that just popped out. He literally said this to me in his office. I didn't know that doctor from anything before that day. And he said, "I don't know your life, but you need to get yourself together." And he walked out the office and left me sitting in there. And so I'm sitting there going, this is not good. And so I had been a poor student of all the things that I teach. Okay. And one of the things that I knew in that moment, it hit me that self care is not only a personal responsibility, it actually is a professional responsibility. If you intend to do the work of empowering, inspiring, motivating, healing others, you have got to see self care as the same kind, on the same plane with the same parity as you do continuing education and colleague support, any of those things, you have to see it as the same parity. Because if you're not well, your patients, your clients, their stuff is being filtered through your stuff. If your stuff is all mucked up, then you're doing a disservice to the work. So that was my journey of experiencing it. And that day is when I created the self care template and moved forward with that. And fortunately, I was able to recover.
Can you tell us about that template? Because I think sometimes these templates give you a structure.
Sure. So the self care template is designed to help people think through what it means to take care of oneself. Because I had found when I would ask women, what do you do for self care? And say, oh, I get my nails done. And I got a massage the other day, and I was like, "Oh, wow, this is so sad. We're so confused about what really in depth, those things are wonderful, but those are
Mm,
luxury care items, right? And that's great. But I define self care as the consistent and ongoing practice of attending to yourself, to the oneself in the six institutes of wellness. And that's how I identify them as six institutes or principles. And that's the social, mental, physical, emotional, spiritual, and financial. So the template creates space for you to think about what things could you do from a monthly, daily, annual perspective to care for yourself in that particular area. And so for social music, well, sometimes we can get so wrapped up, become workaholics, and all we do is the work, and we forget to play and have fun and go on a roller coaster ride. Now, that would not be me. I do not do roller coasters, but I'm saying someone else. But to do those fun things that just for the purpose of fun, just for the purpose of laughter,
mm,
your mental, how are you challenging yourself? Are you still being stimulated mentally?
mm,
Do you have those kinds of intellectual challenges that lift you up? Do you need that? What do you do? Do you read books? What
mm.
kinds of things? Physical, do you work out? Are you caring for yourself in that way? Massages could go in that category, especially if you are intending to make it an ongoing and consistent, because that would be the key, those would be the key words in the definition of self-care for me: consistent and ongoing. Emotional, how you're getting that, your spiritual, and your financial, and that can be one that we skip because we say that it isn't about the money and money isn't everything. Unfortunately, our world functions in an element of capitalism and consumerism, and so money becomes an issue. And so how you manage that also helps manage your self-care.
And I'm really glad that you've been so holistic about it because when you say, Imani, about the financial, here we're not saying you've got to be a millionaire to,
Absolutely.
we're not millionaires here. What we're saying is it's about having that symbolic gesture to yourself. So what I tend to do is I buy myself a book every few months for £10. My present to myself. That a year ago it was myself buying some music for myself on my phone. So it's just a present to myself. So it doesn't mean that you're spending thousands and thousands of pounds or dollars. It's just a symbolic gesture.
This is symbolic, but I am also talking about the idea of your self-care plan around your finances being about managing your money so that it is not a crisis. So on my self-care plan template under finances, it is about creating a savings plan that allows me to take a vacation. That's part of, so it can be as simple as that too.
Yeah, and I'm glad you've talked about money. That it's a kind of a very forbidden conversation that a lot of
Mm.
us have, especially social workers and healthcare professionals. A lot of us are very much, we don't really like capitalism. We don't really like to talk about money, but it's money is such a vital part of our existence. And we shy away from the importance of self care and having savings, having something to fall back on for emergencies rather than living on credit. You know, these are really very important conversations that you are raising, very important issues that you're raising. I wanted to talk to you also, and this is like a very vital question, is if you are the help, how do you ask for help?
That's a great question. If you are the help, how do you ask for help? Is that to realize that the law of reciprocity is always in effect. So first I would say is to understand that the laws of cause and effect are also all part of it, and that our world, our life is cyclical. If you are the help, then that makes an even greater responsibility for you to ask for help. And that's the law of cause and effect. That's the law
Mhm.
of reciprocity. You should be able to give out, to receive what you give, and to recognize yourself and not fall prey to the God complex And I'm also going to introduce this topic because I think this is also a real thing, a term that I'm sure many of the listeners have heard of, but the narcissistic provider or a narcissistic caregiver. And so narcissism in the way that we traditionally think of it really it seems antithetical to what it means to be a care provider, but it isn't. And what it means is that sometimes we get caught up in feeding our ego by serving other people. And we can detach ourselves from that erroneous truth back to the reality of truth, which is that we are doing a small part to contribute to the healing of others. And that a part of that cycle requires us to heal and continue to heal ourselves, that we are flawed, imperfect human beings doing the work of God, but we are not God. And so if you can keep your focus and mindset centered on that as a foundation, then you can remember that, wait, I am my client, to see yourself as your client, not your own client, but we're no different from the people that we serve.
And it's so true, 'cause sometimes I think another coach said this to me, that sometimes your client are really mirrors to
Absolutely.
to yourself. And Prophet Muhammad had a very beautiful saying that's been passed down: a believer is a mirror to another believer. And here, I don't necessarily mean belief in a religion or anything.
Absolutely.
Believer actually in Arabic, the Arabic root word that it comes from, amuna, actually means somebody to rely on, somebody that you trust, somebody that you depend on. So you have spoken so much wisdom here, and I'm just learning so much from you. So I'm really going to thank you, Imani, for your time. I'm going to thank you for your
Thank you.
wisdom. Thank you for being on this summit. And I'm sure that you have got a lot from Imani, because what she's actually saying, I know it's sometimes really difficult to hear, really difficult to press, because we're just so used to doing what we're doing, and breaking those patterns, they're not easy. They're really hard. But the work that we're all doing, it can be just so draining and depleting. And it's really important, and our responsibilities, to look after ourselves and each other. So thank you for joining me. You might
Thank
complete
you.
burnout.
Thank you for having me.